All right, new developments in the Russia investigation. Several reports out today are indicating that Special Counsel Robert Mueller will soon be asking to interview President Trump. Mueller is reportedly interested in questioning President Trump on the firings of both General Flynn and James Comey. But does this mean that the special counsel is closer to wrapping up his case? Here's White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders yesterday.
We want to see this come to a complete and full conclusion. I think we all know what everybody in this room would do if the president did that, and I don't think that's helpful to the process. The president wants to see this end, and he wants to see them finally come to the same conclusion that I think most everyone in America has, that there is nothing to this. They've spent the better part, most of you have spent the better part of a year looking, digging, obsessing.
Robert Driscoll has worked at the Department of Justice. He served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Welcome to the show, sir. There are a lot of people out there that think this means that they are narrowing in on the president. At the same time, we've seen other FBI investigations, including, the one of Hillary Clinton that ended with an interview of her. And we all know they'd already decided at that point that they weren't going to press any sort of charges. I understand this is a special counsel, but what do you conclude from this?
I don't think I conclude anything about the guilt or innocence of the president. I think it's natural that Special Counsel Mueller would want to interview him, and I think it's natural that they'd have a discussion about the terms in which that would happen. I think it does show that he must be near the end, Special Counsel Mueller, of his investigation, because you typically reserve an interview of kind of the top of the pyramid, so to speak, until near the end of the investigation when you feel like you have all your other ducks in a row. So I think there'll be some type of interview, whether it's written questions or a combination of questions and a live interview or not, and they'll work that out. And then I think that hopefully for all of us, this will be resolved in one way or another shortly after that.
Does it impact the findings or what they say or how they proceed, the fact that we're hearing about all these text messages and the secret society and the insurance plan, and 5 months of those texts are missing? And, this investigation is supposed to be about the firing of James Comey. Right. And the specific 5 months of texts that have gone missing are from right after the election until June. James Comey was fired in May. That certainly it speaks to the timeline we're looking at, what was going on in the investigation. Are these things interrelated, or are they not related at all?
Well, I mean, I think they could be tangentially related. I think particularly if there were some kind of conclusion reached about the guilt of people who were investigated by the very agents who had the text messages. But I think that, I view it more as a side issue of those messages seem somewhat inappropriate. And I think the Inspector General report, which we're still waiting for, will have a lot to say about those text messages and the conduct of some of the agents involved and whether they crossed any ethical lines in making some of the comments they did. But, at the end of the day, the facts of this are the facts. And if the facts turn out to exonerate the president and there's no collusion, then that stuff all becomes, I think, somewhat irrelevant. Yeah. I think for institutional reasons, the Inspector General and others will want to follow up. But I think that it doesn't necessarily need to slow down this process.
Let me ask you about some of the things that you just said, because if they're looking for collusion, even if it's there, it's not against the law. So what comes of that?
Well, I was using collusion kind of colloquially. I think that probably what they'd be looking for is some kind of conspiracy, cooperation with the Russians, which, again, we haven't seen anything, any real evidence of that, at least has been leaked. And who knows what Mueller has. He could have things we don't know about. But I think that they're really, it seems to me there's kind of an obstruction type of case that they're looking at now, more things since Trump was president.
Yeah, we don't have time to go through it, but it's more than just the comments on the part of the FBI agents. I mean, it does seem like there is action taken that's totally inappropriate and potentially against the law and deserves its own investigation, because Americans don't feel safe with FBI agents potentially taking the actions that are described there. Quick comment.
Well, certainly the notion of an insurance policy is concerning. It sure did look like some of those agents had at least prejudged where they wanted the investigation to come out. And you'd want to see if that tainted any of the evidence they collected or if that affects it.
Robert Driscoll, thank you.
Thank you.